The Nutrimedical Report. We have Ann Morrison, our scientist here, and Ann, there's lots of information on your Twiland blog. I tell people sign up. It is a amazing blog. You do a tremendous amount of work to put up science on the space weather, plagues, public health, security, all kinds of major issues that you really can't find that high quality information pretty well anywhere else. We have a link directly off of our associates page for your Twiland blog, and I think it's really important people read it weekly. It's, I call, required reading if you want to really become informed here at Nutrimedical. So, Ann, tell us what's the latest on your blog.
Well, what I'm going to be posting up soon, either today or tomorrow, probably tomorrow, is, of course, on this attack that was made in Tennessee, in eastern Tennessee,
right,
where the four Marines were killed and several people were wounded. It took a contingent of policemen shooting at him in order to bring that gunman down, and now we find out that he is a Islamist, probably a radical Islamist, and probably has been in this country, as near as I can tell, most of his life, at least from when he was during his early childhood.
Yeah, I heard he was actually from Qatar, or we call Qatar or Qatar. And his dad actually worked for the Tennessee Valley Authority. He'd had an engineering degree in electrical engineering. But, the basic principles, I think, is there was a recent vote that was actually put up. It was a non-statistically accurate vote, but it was a pretty big sampling, that 51% of Muslims across America support Sharia law. I think what we should do is actually have everyone that supports Sharia law in this country should be deported. Because the idea is directly against the U.S. Constitution. It means that you don't believe in separation of mosque and state, which basically the more moderate, reasonable Muslims understand they need to reinvent themselves so they can live in Western culture and not try to dominate it, even when they get a tiny minority. It's craziness. And I think people don't understand just how nuts it is to have, under Obama just in the last year, another 300,000 Muslims come to this country through, quote, humanitarian bring-ins from countries where we have destroyed their infrastructure. And on the same hand, we don't have any protection for our border. We have sanctuary cities where cities can get away with murder, literally. And the board of directors, say in San Francisco and other sanctuary cities, and even in places like Texas, they're afraid to pass the laws because they'll be considered racist, which isn't, because it's the Hispanic people often that suffer most when you have Hispanic people or people from other countries, like Africa and elsewhere, arrive here and do crimes, and then you don't even do jail time. I saw actual cases in Colorado where vehicular homicide would happen, and they wouldn't go to prison over it. They'd just get deported. 30 days later, they'd be back with their matricular card in the city of Denver, back doing work, driving truck, and running unstable loads, not properly managed, and often under the influence of drugs. I mean, it really is nuts. So Obama is a maniac. He's an idiot. He's not a genius. He has this high opinion of himself. And all the people around him surround him. He surrounds himself with people that narcissistically believe he is a messianic figure. He's not.
Yes, I agree with you. He is. He's a phenomenon.
He's a mentally ill child that happens to be a Satanist who happens to inhabit the White House because the powers that be want a sock puppet for their evil policies to literally deconstruct America, which is a Christian nation based on biblical principles. And people need to understand that. They got away with this in Europe, which is why France is falling with 7.5 million Muslims. They won't get away with it here in America. Because when we have a major switch in government, get rid of Obama and make sure that Hillary or Hitler doesn't get in, you're going to see both Democrats and Republicans realizing if you want a nation, you have a border control, you actually have national laws based on biblical principles, you never allow Sharia law anywhere, no matter how large the population gets, and you don't tolerate people who come to this country and think that they can ever, in the future, ever have Sharia law.
Well, these shootings in Chattanooga, Tennessee, they certainly do raise the question of whether there are sleeper cells in America. We know what sleeper cells are. That's where long-term terrorists come into the country and they lead a normal life, and nobody, they don't go out of their way to raise any questions about them, and then they're they're given the go-ahead and they do something drastic. And in this case, the shooting of 2 military installations. Well, one of them was a reserve office, was a reserve training camp, and the other one was a recruiting station. And they said that what happened was that the Marine that was in the recruiting station told them to gave a signal, and they all got on the floor in a circle, and then they were able, all of them survived, by the way. And they weren't wearing any kind of protective equipment. You know, they were there to meet the public, and so.
Right.
But they knew what to do immediately. They just hit the floor, and then they scurried away, and that saved their lives. And I congratulate them for their training and their being able to do that under what I would consider enormous odds, since none of them were armed.
Well, and I'm going to just pull up my classified background. First off, I took care of Delta as Special Op Forces. I was one of their doctors. And I met for an entire week at in St. Louis, and we were at an environmental health conference for the American Academy of Environmental Medicine in 1997. And I spent many hours talking to our Special Op and Delta guys. And they told me about all kinds of simulations for nuclear bombs going off in U.S. cities, to all kinds of things. And the big problem is, we know there's 37 civil detention training camps by Muslims in America for the past 25 years. This is not something new even under Obama. Both during the George Bush administration, the previous George Bush Sr. and Bill Clinton administrations, they've known there's been Muslim training camps because we're collaborating with them. We know they're in the lower, we call CONUS, or lower 48 states. There's no excuse for us allowing this to happen. We could simply swoop in, grab all their weapons, put them in prison, and deport them. And by the way, I believe in this Cates Law that's going to be put forward in Congress by Senate and Congress, that if you're a felon and you commit and you come back across the border, you spend a minimum first time 5 years in prison, second time 10, third time 20. We need to stop this foolishness. And the people that are involved in, including the board of directors for the city, say, of San Francisco, they need to spend some prison time. That would put scare the bejesus out of them. They would stop doing stupid things like allowing criminals back in because it's a sanctuary city. We know what the problem is, and it's not a matter of putting a giant fence across the Mexican border. We could put drones up there. We could have vehicles coming in. We don't have to put a giant physical fence. We could do all kinds of technology to make sure no one gets there. And when you want to have guest workers, send them a bus and have them bottle water. Don't have them dying across the desert. If you want guest workers, if you need to, put a tracking bracelet on them so you know where they are 24/7, just like we do with criminals, so they can't do weird stuff or disappear. And if they break the tracking bracelet, it immediately sends a signal to go pick them up. I mean, these are technologies that could be done really easy to have guest workers here, transport them like normal human beings, not allow people that are trying to jump the gun in terms of citizenship to get no citizenship but get all the benefits of school, university, etc. I mean, the state of New York is even certifying on the bench as an attorney an illegal person who's not even an American citizen. Now, that's craziness, isn't it?
Well, I think that what you say has a lot of sense in it, and we certainly need to be doing something because this cross-border traffic is just not working for us.
Let's call a spade a spade. What Obama's doing is smirking at us as a narcissistic Satanist while he deconstructs America. And a lot of Democrats are very upset with him because they know, even the so-called pro-abortion people, when they saw this video out about this woman, Dr. God knows her name. I don't even want to mention it. It makes me want to nauseatingly vomit. And they want to say they're preserving different organs in 17-week-olds or whatever so they can sell them to biotech businesses. You know, if we don't get our act together in America, it's going to fly apart. And we'll go over much more news here, but I'll tell you, America's a sitting duck with idiots like Obama and people that don't defend the Constitution and the rights of citizens. He'll be back next week. We'll have him on a couple times. And let's go through lots of this news. We have, of course, your top article is the fifth columnist, militant Islamist. And, of course, Obama is grinning because the more Islamists terrorize us, the more power he gets because he's the chaos master, current punching bag for the globalists in the White House. And he can do a lot of damage between now and the time when they remove him from office, hopefully they will, because if they have a major terror activity, he'll have a state of national emergency, and there won't be any federal election in 2016. So nothing would surprise me about what this guy or the people behind him can do. Nothing.
Well, it's just it just caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting it. I mean, I've heard these warnings before where they say that you need to step up your security, but who would have expected this madman to go on a joyride and shoot at people, at armed forces who weren't even armed? I mean, they were just...
Well, we know that the Hebdo massacre in France were actually indirectly managed by a guy that we were watching that was actually to be extradited to Britain as a criminal. And we knew that he was, in a sense, had international handlers that were tied to the CIA. So even these Muslims don't even know they have handlers at a distance that are actually CIA operatives. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. That is crazy.
That's crazy. And in other words, that's why I call it Terrorists R Us. You know, like the old adage for that company called Toys R Us? They should rename America Terrorists R Us.
Okay. Well, I don't know what more I can say about that.
Let's go to the next news item.
The DoD sent weaponized anthrax to several labs around the world and to 6 countries, and that's Canada, the United States, Great Britain, Italy, South Korea, and Australia. And those are all considered to be first world countries. That is, they're as modern as you can get.
You got a map there to it as well.
They keep adding new countries to the list as they go along. This whole thing with the Department of Defense and Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah has been going since May 27th. So that's almost 7 weeks? 7 weeks. That's almost 2 months.
We did a war game simulation in 1997 with the hazmat teams from the federal government, the Department of the FBI and the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and the Department of Infectious Disease, the University of Colorado. And I was the point man under Reserve Admiral John Hughes, the head of Rocky Mountain Med. And we did this war game simulation where we had a sprayer on the second floor of a window on 17th Avenue, downtown Denver. And then they would have people go in and simulate symptoms to go to St. Joe's Hospital, Presbyterian, St. Luke's, etc. And I was one of the main guys because I have a background in infectious disease because John Hughes didn't know anything. And to analyze whether or not, number one, they would identify a bioweapon release. Number two, they'd treat the person. Number three, they'd prevent further spread into the department so they isolate them properly. And guess what? We killed everybody.
Yeah.
We estimated that the number of people in that exposure period, which is sprayed out the second floor window just with a water vapor, and then we had our hazmat people simulating, going in their EMTs and simulating symptoms at these major hospitals. Not one emergency department identified the disease or bioweapon release. Not one person was treated in a time window that would prevent death. And they have weaponized anthrax. You die a vicious death really fast, and you spread it like crazy as you cough and spray your deadly spray of anthrax, weaponized anthrax, all over the place. So this would kill a lot of people. We estimated that a minimum dead, just with one sprayer out one window, would be about 4,500 immediately in the first 48 to 72 hours. Right.
Well,
so people don't realize this is really crazy crap. And, of course, you remember now, the federal government, I visited in 1997, March 16th. I brought 2 papers, one on the fetal tissue transplantation for various organs, including the diencephalon for Parkinson's disease and other diseases like diabetes, research at multiple institutions in America, Canada, Europe, and China, etc. And the second was the Super Soldier program, which I have intimate classified knowledge of, probably more than anybody who's ever talked about it publicly. And there's a lot of sneaky stuff out there and speculation on the internet. I know classified direct stuff. And I presented these 2 papers, and afterward they gave me a box of documents smuggled out of the World Health Organization headquarters by their doctors of 3 projects: to create the AIDS virus, to create a vaccine which would cause antitrophoblast antibodies to destroy pregnancies, which is basically HCG-laced tetanus vaccine, and to create a weaponized superflu, which they were trying to resurrect since the 1950s, but they only got gene fragments until the 1990s, where they had used a gene bioengine to rebuild it. The globalists want multiple plagues so they can get control. They know the only way they can get collaboration of the global population, including especially 94 million armed Americans, if they terrorize them with a plague, that we have the treatment or cure, and if you don't get it, you're going to die a vicious death. That's the facts. There is no other way of doing it. You can't do it with a power outage. You can't do it with a war. You can't do it even with an economic collapse. The only way you can get collaboration with the public is to tell them you have something that can treat it or prevent it from spreading, and it's a plague. Period. So people need to get that. I'm the first and only one saying that, and you have to understand when you see these plagues popping up all over the place and release of weaponized anthrax, these maniacs want to get a super flu out there, a super SARS beta coronavirus, a super pathogen out there, one or more, so they can subjugate the public, put tags on you so you have an RFID tag, make sure you're not an enemy combatant if you go out of your house and go to your door. And they won't allow you to host quarantine. Guarantee they're going to try to grab your butt if you won't cooperate and put you in a civil detention where they'll make sure you're cross-contaminated. If there is somebody with a pathogen, they'll make sure you're in an open area like Centennial Airport, which they talked about when I talked with the hazmat teams and the FEMA director, and directly confronted him at the Adams Mark Hotel in March of 2001 after we did our war game simulation. So I'm not a minor partner in this. I'm telling you, I'm probably the most highly classified person talking about this on the planet repeatedly, and I'm being proved over and over and over again correct about this, that these idiots, these devils, are going to try to kill millions of people so they get total control of the populations of Earth. Period. Pretty nasty, isn't it? And they wonder why I'm angry?
One of the things that I caught this week, and it's down under biosecurity vaccine, was that when they built the swine flu vaccine in 2008, 2009,
right,
the Pandirex vaccine that was made by GlaxoSmithKline was found to produce narcolepsy in people,
right,
and children especially, and it was eventually withdrawn after 2010. And they had another vaccine that was made by Novartis that they're using. Anyway, so now they've produced narcolepsy in a vaccine that they can give you, and that's part of what you're talking about. And I guess that I would say that GlaxoSmithKline is involved in this effort to produce a vaccine that'll put people to sleep.
Well, not only that, DARPA, and you can actually Google this yourself because I've been talking about it for years, has specific plaque vaccines that can actually shut off the God gene in your brain, specific nuclei that make you resist tyranny. They can actually vaccinate you against resistance. How's that? People say, no, they can't do it. If anybody comes at me with a needle, the vaccine I'm going to give them will contain lead. How's that?
Well, this actually goes through the brain.
And we have Ann with some more stories. The first one is this fusarium. You've got it in your blog here, and it's important people get the blog. Go down to Twyland, sign up for Ann's blog. You're going to get weekly information by email. This is required information. You want to know what's really going on. And this crazy stuff is actually happening, like fusaria in the area, Ohio River Valley all the way down to Missouri. This is a bioweapon. The Russians used it basically after World War I. It's dangerous stuff. If you eat bread made with this, you die. So you got to understand that the U.S. Department of Agriculture has to test the fields to see if the fusaria fungus is growing there, because the mold mycotoxins are lethal. And to give us some more details on this is what's going with Fusarium graminearium, it's called.
Yeah, well, the toxin that it produces is called vomit toxin because it really it gets into your digestive tract, and you're either vomiting or you've got diarrhea, and it's 60% fatal. So you don't want to eat wheat that has Fusarium mold in it. And in fact, there were whole groups of people who died in the Soviet Union because the crop failed. They had no food, so they ground up the moldy wheat and ate it, and they died. 60% of them died.
Wow.
So they say the damage to Missouri's wheat crop is unprecedented. They've never seen it this bad. They say that the state's wheat, the mold in the state's wheat are everywhere. And sometimes they just get a small patch of it, but there's more to it than that this year, and they say that it's very pervasive in Iowa and in Illinois and Missouri, and then in the Ohio River Valley. So that includes parts of Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, West Virginia, and the northern part of Virginia. Yeah. So this is going to devastate. And in fact, the wheat crop, the prices for this year's wheat crop went up when the flooding occurred along the Ohio and the Mississippi and the Missouri rivers. And, it continued. It didn't just happen once. It continued all the way through June and up into the middle of July. So they just haven't been able to get out there, and there's nothing they can do. They need to plow it under. There may be fields here and there that don't have this fusarium in it, but they're few and far between. So if we can't export wheat because we don't have any, then you might think, well, corn. Is corn affected? No, corn is not affected. As it turns out, the years that you get fusarium in wheat, you do not get the same aflatoxin in corn. That's a different time. That's a different type of year. That's a very dry year that you get the aflatoxin in corn. So they should be able to sell corn, but they haven't been able to get into the fields to plant the corn. They have tractors that are mired down in mud, in feet of mud. And
that's because of so much rain, right? So the mold's going to grow because of the extreme weird climate, which is moldier or wetter. The increased ultraviolet light, which tends to promote growth of mold but kills crops. Because I learned this 35, 40 years ago, that if you have a surge of 75% drop in the ozone layer, even for 45 minutes, the crop will die, but the mold will grow. So we're getting an increase in the high-energy ultraviolet B, C, and D light, which you can go to LSEMF and get your own detector if you don't believe me. And you'll see that the amount of ultraviolet light and higher energy levels being put up by the sun with a thinner ozone layer caused by multiple things, geoengineering the upper atmosphere with nanoparticles, and Fukushima Daiichi is chewing away at the ozone layer. The ozone layer tries to repair itself, but it recurs every winter, and it gets worse, and it comes back. And we have surges of radiation from Fukushima that continue to chew away at it, and so it combines with weather systems sitting over areas like the Ohio Valley, and when the mold surge happens, it kills the crop. So what's going on is we're going to see famine, and I predict, and this is not my opinion alone, this is a thus saith the Lord, worldwide famine starts this fall, period. Worldwide famine starts this fall. People need to respect that and realize if you don't have food supplies, there's worldwide famine starting this year, and it's going to take years of proper action to stop it. And the problem is, because of commodities, we're going to start seeing surges in prices. We're going to see populations not afford to be able to buy food, and we're seeing a contraction in the value of currencies versus commodities, which means the pressure on currencies like Greece and the European euro, etc., it's going to get very dear to be able to buy food, and many third world countries are going to starve to death. Like the quote in the Bible, a omer of wheat for a day's wages, but do not harm the oil and the wine. What God is saying in that ancient prophecy is the rich nations will still be able to have food. The poor nations will starve to death working for a day's wages just to keep themselves alive for another day.
Well, this certainly does look like God's wrath, and this is occurring right after the passage of the Supreme Court decision on unorthodox marriages.
They need to impeach every one of these judges, especially Judge Roberts that actually passed Obamacare, which basically ensconces a healthcare system that makes sure that it's so unaffordable that people can't pay their co-pays or their deductibles, so they don't use their health insurance, and it ensconces eugenics, which means if you're a certain age, certain treatments have to go to ethics committee before you can be treated, even if it's urgent, and if you don't get treated within hours, you die. So this is the Obamacare policy, and it will destroy healthcare. It'll destroy the ethics of doctors and push it to the point where a lot of people will get out of medicine or leave the country or just retire early. And you're going to see a lot of people put down under the aegis of so-called Obamacare. That's how bad it is.
Well, yeah, and the fact that the other, weather is not just bad here in the United States, it's bad around the world. The monsoons which water the subcontinent of Asia, have been slow in getting into India. And so India is not sure they're going to have enough time to plant the rice that they need. China has economic issues. They have their stock markets are still falling, and what that means is they're not going to have the money to buy the commodities that they've already signed the contracts for. So things are going to slow down probably by this fall, and it's going to get drastic, Dr. Bill. They don't, and they're saying that the El Nino current across the equator, which is warmer than normal, looks like it's strong enough it's going to last into the winter. If it lasts into the winter, then we will get a heavy snow here in the Midwest, and there'll still be drought in California. So this is not good for anybody.
Well, when the governor a couple months ago comes out and says that the drought, if it continues for a year, can only support 500,000 people in a population of 39.8 million, which is the fifth largest economy on the planet, is just the state of California. This guy, Mr. Moonbeam, needs to be impeached and put in a psych ward. Like Ray Davis, he needs to become a very bad chapter in a history book.
Yeah.
Okay. And I want to make a statement that's really important people understand. And I've got an interpretation of a biblical scripture that explains it. And we talked about this with the Professor McCanny the other day. These events that are going to cut off the killing of much of the population of Earth by the globalists. Because the biggest danger, and I agree with Professor McCanny and 90% of what he says, is not an approaching dwarf star and these other things. In fact, if anything happens, like a meteor storm or a CME, it would actually stop the killing fields. The globalists have artificially created and destroyed the ability of the climate and the jet stream with the Macondo drill site in the Gulf of Mexico that stops the loop current. They've purposely not fixed Fukushima, which is destroying the ozone layer that's disrupting the climate. They've purposely disrupted the northern jet stream, which is gone. It's all broken up. We're getting what's called a polar vortex pulling weather systems down from the North Pole. We've got drought on the West Coast that if it continues, and even the Columbia River is the lowest it's been in history. All of this artificial, including economic chaos in Greece and Europe and elsewhere. The chaos masters are panicking because if there is a galactic or solar event, it will cut off their killing fields. And God's promised, I shall shorten those days lest no flesh survive. So what God's saying, I'm going to send galactic and solar events to stop the killing, not to start it, believe it or not. Talking about the jet stream next. This is a really important article. As I say, Twilight's really important. This hour, science hour, is important. Let's talk about this because I look at this and I think, oh my gosh, the jet stream, the northern jet stream's hitting this blocking high in the North Pacific. It's been parked there for a number of months, which is why we have the drought. But it also means we don't have normal climate. We don't have the normal control of weather systems, so they can park over, let's say, Tbilisi in Georgia and have such a flood that the animals get out of the zoo. And one tiger killed a few weeks ago. One man had injured another, so eventually shot him. And they had a hippo, which is a very dangerous animal, get out of the zoo as well. The weather systems that parked over Texas a few months ago, these are all because the jet stream is gone. It's no longer existing over the United States, is it?
It isn't. It's in the Gulf of Alaska. There is a high-pressure system at 30,000 feet, and it'll eventually, I hope, move into Canada. But right now, we don't have anything. We have a low that's in Idaho and maybe the western part of Montana at a very high level. Other than that, we don't have jet stream weather. We don't have high-velocity winds at 30,000 feet to carry the storm system. So what happened was that they indicated that we were going to have a heat warning starting today at 1. Well, at 3 o'clock in the morning, they revised it and said, no, it's starting right now. So they've expanded the heat warning, and it goes until 8 p.m. on Sunday.
Are you talking about the heat warning in Missouri, right? Because that's where you are, Missouri, right?
I'm talking about Missouri, and well, it's more than just Missouri. It's all the upper Midwest. They expanded it a lot. They expanded it into Illinois and Indiana and Ohio and Kentucky and Tennessee and even Arkansas. So this not only did they start it early, but they also expanded it. So they think that this hot weather that we're getting right now is going to last even longer. And one of the reasons that happens is because we don't have the jet stream moving the storm systems along, and so the high, which we're under right now, is not going anyplace. Where the high. Now you remember that a high pressure forces air from the stratosphere to the ground. Now the air at the stratosphere is cold, 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 and you might think, after seeing the day after tomorrow, that cold would come down, but that would be wrong, because what happens as air compresses and as it falls, it compresses, it heats up. I mean, that's just basic physics. Right. And so we're under a high, and it looks like we're going to be under the high probably through Monday. And so we're having probably like a 4-day drought. I guess you would call it a drought, but it's going to be excessive heat warnings, and we may even break some record temperatures here in the Midwest.
The other thing is, when you have that compressed hot air, it sucks up moisture like crazy and just pulls it out of the ground and everything near it too.
Oh, that's right. And they've already warned us that that's happening. Luckily, we had the floods, and there's a lot of water that can be pulled out of the air. But I suspect by Saturday evening or Sunday morning, most of that excess water will be gone. And then we'll watch for the waters in the rivers to drop. And right now we have a flood in Missouri. At the Mississippi River at St. Louis is still in flood stage, but the way they show it, they project ahead of time on their. This is a projection ahead of time, and they show it falling rapidly. I mean, like falling from 30 feet to 15 feet in 6 days. So
wow.
That's the effect that this high-pressure system will have at the Mississippi River. And, the Mississippi River is a big river. They have had trouble getting the barges up and down the Mississippi River because of the flooding. What happens is that the barges lose control, and then, they run into something. And, in fact, a man was killed because a tugboat hit the Eads Bridge, which is a bridge that goes over the Mississippi River from Missouri to Illinois. And he was working, there was a crew working on that bridge. They were doing maintenance activities. The tugboat hit the bridge, and he fell and landed on the tugboat and died because he dropped about 30 feet.
People don't realize just how much material is carried in one of these barges. One barge can carry the amount of cargo of a couple, maybe 100 or more trains of cargo. So we're talking about massive amounts of weight. So if you have a low river or you have silting that builds up because of the issues that are going on here, it gets really, really dangerous. And of course, a lot of our traffic comes down the Missouri River and the Mississippi rivers. And if this tugboat traffic gets jammed because of these extreme weather patterns, but what I see happening, and this is something people should be aware of, I believe we're heading into what I call the birth pang time. And I think it's going to start this fall. I believe that right now, 2 days after the Elul 29, on the 25th, the Pope's going to have an encyclical. This guy is an anti-Pope. People need to realize that. If you disagree with me, have enough nerve to call into the show, and I will give you so much proof that this man is, without any doubt, the anti-Pope. This is the best candidate in human history for a false prophet, period. And we have in the White House a deconstructing hater of America. You can see every action he takes is to destroy the family, to support and behind the scenes support the Supreme Court with destroying the idea of marriage. They even have a congresswoman here from California that's saying that they want to get rid of the idea of using the term federally of man and wife. Imagine. You can take spouse and spouse. And, of course, it opens up the door to pedophilia, to polygamous marriages, to God knows, maybe marrying your pet. Who knows what's next? This government's crazy. And the Supreme Court and the politicians are out of their cotton-picking mind. And we need to start dissecting ourselves away. That's why we have our carrot bar business that we're offering. That's why we tell people get nutraceuticals, get away from the medical system, get yourself ready to get out of the big cities. Our civilization is, you can hear that creaky sound. That's the creaking sound of the joints of our civilization ready to fall. It is. People say, "Oh no, you're just a conspiracy theory." I said, "You know what? If you wait till the last moment to be like, like waiting in Sodom and Gomorrah, thinking it's going to get better, it's not going to get better." We have to be witnesses for the truth, but at some point you just got to get ready to get out. It's going to get bad. I'm not talking about leaving America. I'm talking about leaving the big cities, getting out in the country, getting away from being downwind of nuclear reactors, getting off grid, getting, wing generators, getting yourself ready for the fact that our civilization is going to crash and burn real soon. And it's by design. It's not just artificial. In fact, I think that God's going to send judgments on the world that will stymie them, just like the ancient passage of comets that stopped ancient warring peoples from fighting and killing each other because he knew the star signs were there that the comet indicated it was time to stop fighting and killing. And I think when people see global and cosmic cataclysms coming upon the earth, whatever they're doing, they're going to stop. That's how bad it is. And people say, "No, that can't happen." I say, well, I'm going to tell you, if there's a God in heaven, which there is, do you think he's happy with America? Absolutely not. Because he knows they can't hide the fact that we're supporting ISIS. We're supporting Islam with Obama's actions. He has this grinning look when he saw what happened down with this another massacre by this Islamist. Because the more chaos happens, the more power he gets. I am seriously doubting whether he's going to be removed from office in 2016 or there'll be a state of martial law here, so Obama will be prez for life as dictator. I'm worried about it.
Speaking of cataclysms, we had a magnitude 6.4 earthquake in Central America. I mean, in the Caribbean Sea, just off the coast of South America, in the Barbados region.
Right.
I believe that's run by the UK. And it was at the right depth to create a tsunami. It was at 6.2 miles deep.
Yeah, which they're talking about 6.2 miles or roughly around 10 kilometers deep, right?
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of science, amazing blog. I appreciate what your work you do, and you do an amazing job. It's, again, Twyland. Go to Nutrimedical, go to the Associates, sign up for the blog, get the information, analyze it, and say, be skeptical. Once you do your own research and you find out that we're telling the truth, that it fits with the Bible and the science fits, do something. Don't just sit there in the middle of the highway of civilization and thinking, it's going to get better without your action. It won't. It's going to get a lot worse before it becomes cataclysmic. Take care of your health with NutriMeds. Take care of your business by getting involved with carrot bars. Get the proper science. Get out of the big cities. Get yourself active and realize things aren't going to be the same real soon.